Well, I'm often asked if I care about my reputation anymore. And my answer is no. I don't think I've ever really cared about my reputation. I might have pretended to care. It might have looked like I was caring. But I don't know what my reputation was. I am, and I've always been, a very polarizing figure in America. I am not liked, and I am liked, but the literary establishment does not like me. I am the worst reviewed writer of my generation by the literary establishment press. They think I'm a stain on the literary world. And so, in that way, I guess that started with less than zero. So the idea of me protecting a reputation or wanting to write books that win prizes or whatever, I think that went out the window a long time ago. I realize I care even less about my reputation now. You age out of it. I hope people age out of it. Like, I care about my literary reputation. I care about the plumbing in my apartment that's going to cost me a lot of money. I care about my boyfriend who has addiction issues. I care about my aging parents. I care about a lot of things that have nothing to do with Bret Easton Ellis. And Bret Easton Ellis doesn't live with me in the apartment in LA on Doheny. He is a constant on a tour like this, and I'm constantly reminded of this fact that I am, for some people, an icon, and for some people, the poster boy of Gen X literary whatever. And it's just all kind of surreal because of the disconnect. The reality of my everyday life, the solitary reality of being in an office writing all day and then seeing two friends at night in a nearby restaurant, and going to the Heartland Festival here in Denmark, I forgot where I was for a moment, and seeing, I don't know, 1,000, 1,200 people come it's surreal at times. I don't know why I'm so polarizing. That's the word I'd use, polarizing. You go on to Goodreads.com, and they have reviews of the shards. I think right now maybe 1,200, 1,300, and 5 stars, 1 star, 5 star, 1 stars. DNF. What's DNF? Definitely not finished. I didn't know that. And the same thing on Amazon. 2 stars, 5 stars, 4 stars, 1 stars. Very, very, people hate me or people love me. So it cancels itself out. I mean, it all cancels itself out. I guess I could, embrace the percentage of people who give me 5 stars and who love me, but I don't do this for anybody. This is the other problem. I write from a place of feeling. I am not a career writer. I write as a hobby. I enjoy writing. It's bliss. It's happiness. But you don't always have a book. And so I don't take advances from publishers. I don't promise them, I have these 2 books and whatever. When I have a book ready, and if I think I should publish it, I give it to them. But I can't be under any sort of contractual agreement with a publisher like that. So again, I feel a disconnect from the literary world and from the literary establishment and from all of my publishers, no matter how kind and gracious they are, from this notion of the Bret Easton Ellis who gives signings and makes appearances. My life is not that. It's mostly not that. And the other benefit to being a writer, I guess, and if you have any sort of fame or notoriety, is that your name is recognized, but your face isn't. I can walk around and be completely anonymous, but someone sees that credit card with that name on it, and then, or they see that I'm coming into the dining room, that will do it. I bet if I just walked into the dining room and sat down and didn't have a reservation or anything, I don't know if the chef would have come out and said hello to me the other night when I was staying at this 4-star hotel in the countryside of Denmark. But it happened. My parents had books. House was filled with books. As young as I can remember, there were books everywhere. And my parents were big readers. They read everything. They read quality literature and they read pop literature. They read bestsellers and they read European writers. I was introduced to books on my own through, of course, children's books, pictures books, then what we now call young adult novels. I'm dating myself, but the Hardy Boys mysteries I was fascinated with at 5, at 6. And then I was reading my parents' adult novels at 7 and 8. Not the whole things, but I would be reading chapters of like The Godfather. They had a copy of The Godfather in the house. It was the first time I saw the F word, fuck, in a book. And I was shocked. Must have been 6 or 7. I said, oh my God, they put that word in this book. And there was something very sexy about a lot of these books my parents had. And I also needed to escape from the darkness of the house I lived in, which, it was painful at the time, but I can talk about it quite cheerily now to a degree. A lot of pain in the house, a lot alcoholism, a divorce was happening. My father was a very, very angry man. And so I disappeared into books. I loved books. I fell in love with books at a very early age. I read everything. I was a voracious reader. And I think part of that love of reading made me want to write a book. And so I started with children's books at 6 and 7, and I was doing the drawings myself. And then I moved on to doing my own comic books, where I did all the drawings myself, and I wrote all of the dialogue and description. And then I did a novel at 14, which I just enjoyed doing. It was just really fun. And I wrote another one at 15, and then I began really concentrating on Less Than Zero at about 16. And that was a project that I became very, very serious about. And it was something that kind of obsessed me for the following 4 years. And all of this has to do with the fact that I simply loved to read, and I loved books. That's where the impulse to write came from. Very easy, very simple. Well, what fascinated me about writing, unlike other writers who think it's so fun because you can create anyone you want and create any world you want, that's a given. That has nothing to do with my creative process, or even if I have a process. For me, it's simply enjoyable. It's not for me, that suggests an intellectual process. Writing for me is an emotional process. I'm feeling something, therefore I want to write about this feeling. I don't have things I want to say. I don't have political things I want to talk about. I'm not writing because I can control a character or I can create a world. I'm actually writing about a feeling. I'm writing about something that's going on in my life that is obsessing me, that's bothering me, that's hurting me, that's confusing me, that's distracting me. And then a book comes out of that. And that's how it's always been. Early on, the first book I wrote about my summer in Elko, Nevada, way out in the middle of nowhere in Nevada, where my grandfather had a hotel. And I wrote about my summer as a 14-year-old boy and what I did and my problems and, this kind of adolescent angst. And I was going through a lot of emotional distress. And writing that novel made the summer great. It made all of the distress kind of go away, or clarified it. It clarified the distress, made me understand why I was feeling this way. It's a very basic way to write, and Less Than Zero certainly was the same way. I wanted to capture these feelings that I was having at that moment in my life, especially this notion of numbness as a feeling. I didn't think that was contradictory. I thought numbness in that moment, a kind of coolness, was very much a part of how I was looking at the world, and I wanted to get that onto the page, that mood, a vibe, an atmosphere. And so, to me, it always comes from that place. It doesn't come from Well, today I think I'm going to write about how much it sucks to live in America. Okay, well, I'll name him Ralph and I'll set it in Las Vegas. It doesn't happen that way. It can take months and months or a year for a book to fully announce itself to me because finally I am feeling it. And I have no other option but to write about this feeling. And then a story presents itself, a narrator presents itself, and I work it out during the process of writing the novel. Well, there has been a lot of controversy around my books, especially American Psycho. I guess really only American Psycho, but I don't care. It has nothing to do with anything. It's nonsense. There was so much controversy about American Psycho before it was published. It was all before it was published. Once it was published, a lot of people said, oh, this is some boring book about designer labels and dumb guys on Wall Street. But it was the controversy building up to the cancellation of that book. The book was canceled by my publishing house in 1990, and then subsequently by the 30 other book houses, publishing houses around the world who had published Less Than Zero and The Rules of Attraction. All dumped me because of the contents of American Psycho. So certainly people were offended, and they were afraid of it. By that time, I had kind of moved on. I had worked out whatever my issues were with whatever I was going through during 1986, 87, 88, 89, while I was working on that novel, and I was done with it. And then to be confronted by this controversy where the National Organization of Women said this book is a how-to manual for serial killers. I thought that is absurd. That is absurd. You know, you'd think I couldn't take it seriously. And I was young enough and resilient enough to say, fuck you, I don't care. And I have to say that the only damage that the controversy did to me was that it made me distrust the world of adults. And it was also the first inkling of corporate culture taking over the arts, because the cancellation of American Psycho did not come from within the editorial house of the publisher. It came from the corporation that owned the publishing house. So it was a corporation that owned a publishing house that told the publishing house to cancel a novel for its content I had already been contracted to write. Unique, a very unique situation that has made me, and made me then controversial, but that controversy has followed me to the point where I am sitting with you here in 2023 talking about it, still talking about it. But I don't care about the controversy. I mean, you know, there's controversy about my new novel, The Shards. A lot of people say that I'm very blasé about certain things that I didn't take that seriously in 1981 that people today take very seriously. And all I can tell them is it was a different generation. We were more adult, I think. We were more grown-ups, and we didn't let everything trigger us, and we didn't freak out in the ways that so many people seem to do today about everything. So I don't know. It has nothing to do with my life, and I am not interested in creating controversy or courting controversy. Though, of course, controversy, as we all know, sells. Film and literature are two very different things, and how you approach each is very, very different. For me, literature, fiction, writing fiction is all about consciousness and style. It's about consciousness and style. And that is what makes a book work for me. I don't care about narrative. I don't care about the story. I care about the style. I care about how it is told. And that has held true to me ever since I discovered Ernest Hemingway at, I don't know, at 12 or 13. And I noted that, well, the way he's telling this and the way he's writing it is making it so powerful. This material in the hands of a bad stylist or an indifferent stylist, I wouldn't care. But suddenly I cared about language. And Hemingway was the demarcation for me, but between all the pop novels and the bubblegum books and the cheap horror novels and paperbacks I read, and then moving into my adolescence where I was looking and hungry for style. Film isn't about that. Film writing isn't about that. Film writing is about structure. It's basically about structure. And it's not about language. And it's not about consciousness. It's about narrative. It's about a story. And it's about structure, how you're structuring the story to fit within the mainstream movie world, which is roughly 100 minutes. So that's roughly 100 pages of script. That's about an hour and 40 minutes, whatever. And you have to figure all of this stuff out. And that's the difference. Writing screenplays for me was never part of the deal. I grew up in Hollywood. I knew the misery of the screenwriter because I saw it in certain parents of my friends. A filmmaker. I always wanted to be a filmmaker. And so I had a production company with a friend of mine, and I did write a couple of scripts that we thought could easily be made because they were horror scripts, and horror scripts are very easy to finance. At the time, however, we didn't make those movies, and the company fell apart for whatever reason. But the problem with Hollywood and with making films is that it's very, very expensive. And you need a team to all be on in the same car. And that's very, very hard to do. And the average length of time for a movie that gets made is usually about 7 years. 7 years from concept and script to release, to theatrical release. It's about 7 years on average. That's what everyone says. So it's time consuming. It takes a lot of money. It takes a lot of effort. And quite honestly, I had chances to be a director and direct scripts of mine that have fallen through. It happens all the time. But I did believe for a long time that the TV series was the new novel. And so I spent a great deal of time in Hollywood with assignments and with great ideas for things that I thought would work better as a series than they would as a novel. And none of them happened. I don't know if the formative years stick to us in the degree that many people think they do. I do know that for me, for example, with The Shards, 17 was a pivotal year. And I knew it at 17, and I knew it at 18. And I always wanted to write about that year. I didn't know how to write about that year until I was 56. I didn't know that. I didn't know that was going to happen. I tried writing it at 18. I tried writing The Shards at 18. And that formative year. But I couldn't write about that formative year, and I couldn't fully comprehend or understand the meaning of it until I was 56 or 57. That happens. There are many formative years. My midlife crisis were some of the most formative years I've had in terms of growing up, in terms of changing, in terms of accepting aging and getting older. As formative as that year I was 17, which was the demarcation between adolescence and adulthood, between a kind of innocence and corruption. Formative year, my late 20s, when I was in love with someone and we were having a relationship. Those were very formative years. So formative years happen all the time. And then there are just the fun, inconsequential years or whatever. So I wouldn't necessarily say that my teenage years were so formative that I have to keep going back to them. I do think someone once said something very interesting about celebrity, that one kind of stays the same age the year they become famous, that it kind of freezes you in time. I don't know necessarily if that's true about me, but I do think, and I reference it in The Shards, about the notion that how a man can stay a child. And there are days when I believe that to be true about me, and I wrote about that in The Shards, that there was something about that moment in time that's so impactful when you realize you are a known quantity and people know who you are, that freezes something in you. And sometimes I'm concerned about that, and sometimes I'm more concerned about the plumbing in my apartment. So I don't know. My formative years are all over the place. I don't know when a book spills over to a reader. That's not my concern. That's not why I write. The Shards is dedicated for no one. I've wanted to use that dedication for many, many years because I write a book for myself. I'm sorry if that sounds selfish. I just don't write it for the reader. I write it to work out something that's going on within myself, and I need to figure it out. I need to relieve myself of it. And in the case of The Shards, it was an overwhelming sense of loss and nostalgia about that crucial year of being 17 and of the LA I grew up in that is now gone, doesn't exist anymore. I looked for those friends I loved. I didn't realize how much I loved them until 56. Couldn't find many of them on social media. Many of them were men my age who just simply don't have a social media page. Wasn't surprised by that, but I was haunted by it. And all of these things started swirling around me, and I became so emotional about it that that week, I began The Shards. I wrote the first 2 paragraphs on a Thursday night in April of 2020. If you had asked me on that Monday, do you think you're going to write The Shards this week or begin it? I would go, no, I don't think so. I don't think so at all. It just swept over me. So I wrote those first 2 paragraphs of the book. And when I realized that even though this book takes place among a group of 17-year-old high school kids, it doesn't need to be narrated by the 17-year-old high school kid. It can be narrated by the 56-year-old man looking back on these terrible events that befell him. When I realized that, then I could execute a narrative in nostalgia. With the 17-year-old Bret narrating this in 1981, I can't do that. So suddenly all of my feelings about that time and that place and my memories just were able to completely flow out of me, and I could look back at all of these events and place them in context and play them from an angle of being much more mature. And it just all kind of came together. And then the next day, I wrote the entire first chapter, which is kind of a foreword of what is about to happen in the book. And then we were off to the races. But the reader really has no say in the book. I don't know who that reader is. As we've been talking about, I am polarizing. Am I going to try to win over the reader who hates me? Am I going to try and please the reader who loves me? It has nothing to do with them. It has nothing to do with an audience. It simply has to do with what's going on between me and this material. Well, the argument could be made that the more authentic that I stay to myself and not think about an audience, the more authentic the book becomes to a reader. And that could be a reason, I don't know why, that my books do work for a certain audience, and that I am still in print, and that there were much better behaved, maybe even better writers who won prizes and got good reviews 35 years ago, who are no longer publishing, who are no longer with us. Maybe a little hate is good for a career. Maybe a little hate keeps it going along, keeps you in the discussion. I don't know. But again, that's a reaction. That's like caring about what the critics say. You always get complaints. People always complain about this or that. It's too violent. I was so shocked this time out that people complained about the sex scenes. That I was somehow a pedophile because I was writing about underage kids having sex. I'm sorry, we were in 1981. And I'm going to write about it. It seems ridiculous not to have those descriptions there. But people now in this climate are overly sensitive and they think it's, dirty. I wouldn't change anything. People either think the book is too long, which I've been over this book hundreds of times. It's exactly the length I think it needs to be. I mean, if I listened to what everyone said, I'd be walking into walls, you know? So it's got to be my vision. And what I usually turn into a publishing house is the final draft. I usually don't. Copy editing is extremely important. We use 2 copy editors on this book because of its length. And some basic, what I call tree editing. Tree editing is sentence editing. Forest editing is like structural problems. And structurally, I'm always know exactly. I just need some tree cleaning because some of my sentences can get a little unwieldy. I like run-on sentences. I like long sentences. I also like short sentences. I don't know.